And there isn't one of us that doesn't want to be someplace else. This is what we do. Who we are.
Survive a war, you gotta become war.
Boom! Hello and welcome to Rambo and Friends. Today, Rambo is off spending some much-deserved rest and relaxation time on the beach to get his chi aligned, and he has generously allowed me to serve as your substitute host and everything. And I've got a great show prepared for you today. So I just want to thank all of you for being here. I am Patrick Gunnels, and I'm really excited to yap with you guys primarily about vaccines today, and it's going to be a lot of fun. In the meantime, I want to thank people who have already posted super chats, which is absolutely amazing. Micro Toolmaker has just gifted me a free 1-month channel subscription to Rambo and Friends, so that's awesome. In addition, Micro Toolmaker, $55. Where we go one, we go all. Thank you so much for that. 10 subscriptions to Rambo and Friends, also donated by the one and only Micro Toolmaker. As always, I can't tell you how much we appreciate all that stuff. Just to let everybody know, just because I'm the substitute host, this is still on Rambo and Friends. And so all of these super chats are going to Rambo. So don't forget, he works hard for you. Toss him a few bucks here and there. It certainly helps out when that happens. The big deal, I think, still going on in social media news is the fact that YouTube has outright admitted that they basically committed crimes, in my opinion, in suppressing free speech on their platform under pressure from the Biden administration. The part that I'm kind of blown away about is the fact that YouTube's suppression began in 2017. Patreon started banning people in 2017. 2020, the FBI was suppressing speech everywhere. That was Trump's FBI. So it's not the Biden administration. It is a rogue bureaucracy. The Mr. Leota, $17. We love you, Gunny. Love you back, bro. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm just going to jump right in to the show now because I'm really excited about everything that we're going to be talking about today. Root Bitch is one of my contributors on Reading Epic Threads. By the way, Reading Epic Threads, you will find it at the Patrick Gunnels YouTube channel. So check that out. I'm going to start with a show that has been curated by the content creator Root Bitch. That's the handle he/she goes by. I'm going to start with an article from Factinate.com. And this is kind of interesting stuff. I'll just give you a little spoiler. The man who became a psychiatrist by filling out a form, by Alex Summers. Few real-life stories are as darkly comedic as that of Gert Postel, a German man who successfully posed as a psychiatrist, not once, but multiple times, despite having no medical qualifications. His story is like a psychological thriller crossed with satire and raises serious questions about expertise, authority, and institutional blindness. From mailman to medical expert. Born in 1958 in East Germany, Gert Postel trained as a mailman, not a doctor. But from early on, he showed a sharp mind and a deep fascination with language and authority. He successfully impersonated a doctor in September 1982 in Flensburg by using a jargon-heavy application and verbal flim-flam to obtain a position he was grossly unqualified for. He had an axe to grind. Postel's motivation wasn't entirely financial. He seemed to have a genuine contempt for the psychiatric establishment, which he viewed as pseudoscientific and easily conned. His resentment stemmed from his belief that his mother, who suffered from chronic depression, had lost her life to the improper administration of antidepressants by psychiatrists. He fooled the system spectacularly. Postal's most audacious con came in the 90s when he secured a job as chief psychiatrist at the Chadras District Hospital, one of the largest mental institutions in the former East Germany. Using forged documents and an impressive interview performance, Postal beat 40 qualified applicants for the job. Shockingly, Postal applied under his own name and got the job, even though he'd been convicted in 1984 for forging academic documents in the Flensburg case. A respected member of the profession. For 18 months, Postal performed his duties without detection. He attended conferences, gave lectures, and even conducted diagnoses and treatment plans, all while being completely untrained. His staff and patients had no idea they were dealing with a fraud. An imposter is unmasked. Postal's downfall came in 1997 when his application for a more senior position triggered a more thorough background check. Authorities discovered his real identity and prior impersonations. He was arrested and tried in court, where the extent of his deception shocked the public and medical community. Judgment. In 1999, Gert Postal was sentenced to 4 years in prison for fraud and impersonation. During his trial, he remained defiant, claiming that his successful masquerade proved how fragile and performative medical authority can be. A celebrity of deception. Far from being humbled by his exposure, Postal emerged from prison with a kind of cult status in Germany. He gave interviews, wrote a memoir titled Doktorspiele, a pun that translates roughly to Doctor Games, and became a folk anti-hero for skeptics of psychiatric medicine. Public opinion split down the middle. To some, Postal is a cautionary tale about institutional arrogance. To others, he's a dangerous con artist who put lives at risk. Postal himself seems to relish the ambiguity of his legacy, often blurring the line between critique and narcissism. Ethics, psychiatry, and the power of performance. The Postal case raised uncomfortable questions for Germany's healthcare system. How could someone with no formal training rise to such a position undetected? What does it say about the criteria used to evaluate professional competence? Is psychiatry especially vulnerable to such deception, or would other fields be just as susceptible? Critics cry credentialism. Critics argue that Postal exposed a system more concerned with appearances and credentials than with true understanding and critical thinking. Supporters of psychiatry emphasize the danger he posed to vulnerable patients and warn against romanticizing his actions. A lesson in credibility, Gert Postal's story is a bizarre reminder that confidence, language, and presentation can sometimes be mistaken for competence. His con was elaborate, sustained, and it was devastating to the idea that titles and degrees always signal expertise. An imposter's legacy. While he may have fooled the system, Postal exploited trust, and the ethical questions around his story remain controversial. Whether clever critic or reckless fraud, Gert Postal remains one of the greatest imposters of our time. A man who diagnosed the weaknesses of the system by playing its game better than the professionals. And now, please watch this.
Part of the government, I respectfully prefer to be
outside of government.
Mr. Rogers, I understand your degree is in political economy, correct?
Correct. Correct. As I imagine you know, to earn a PhD, one must make an original contribution to knowledge as verified by external peer review. That's the degree that I have. And unfortunately, these days, medical school is just a glorified trade school for people trained to obey the pharmaceutical industry. Now, trade schools can be great, but Western allopathic medicine has completely lost its way. So, but I'm a doctor of philosophy and social sciences.
Okay, I guess we've established your views on the medical profession. You know, I'm curious, I don't know the answer to this question. In some of your Twitter posts, you said, and I'm quoting, "You people are all going to spend eternity in hell. Nuremberg 2 first, then hell." What did you mean by that?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I believe that we are in the midst of one of the greatest crimes in human history. We have a product being injected into children 70 plus times over the course of their development that's never been tested against a proper saline placebo. Over that course of that time period, chronic illness in this country has gone from 10% of children having one or more chronic conditions to now more than 50% of children having one or more chronic conditions. Secretary Kennedy, in the hearing that was last week, said that the latest data from the CDC says that 76% of Americans now have one or more chronic conditions. And I believe that lots of these chronic conditions stem from iatrogenic injury. We have 3 million children with autism. Back in 1970, the rate was so low that it was essentially zero. I'm outraged by that, and I think every person in this room should be outraged by that. I don't know how to say it anymore clearly that we need to change course in this country. And I'm terribly disappointed by the medical profession. In the social sciences, there's this term called epistemic capture, which is when the entire knowledge production process becomes captured by one industry. And that's what's happened with science and medicine. And so I think we need to change course. And I think the people who have covered up the autism epidemic and the epidemics of iatrogenic injury should be held to account for their actions.
Are you comparing? I'm holding up a copy of the tweet. I'm sure you recognize it. You people are all going to spend eternity in hell. Nuremberg 2. And in another tweet, you made, I think, fairly clear that you thought Nuremberg 2 referred to executions. And then you said, if we could hit those sorts of numbers, meaning the numbers of executions following the Holocaust, when pharma fails, we would be doing great. I think the inevitable conclusion there is calling for the execution of people.
I think that's overstated. I think you're putting words in my mouth, respectfully, Senator.
I'm asking the question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So look, let's put it in the context of COVID. I've already talked about autism. Let's talk about COVID. The state, however you define that, the military, CDC, Tony Fauci, Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina, created a weaponized virus, correct? Gain-of-function research. They contracted it out to China and caused a pandemic around the world once it was released. The government created a weaponized virus that then got out and caused a global pandemic. When are we going to have accountability for that? I generally don't understand why government officials are allowed to engage in
Rogers, I'm not
gain-of-function
putting
research.
words in your mouth. I'm just quoting your words.
I would like to
And
have
I think
accountability for the COVID era, and I'd like to have accountability for the fact that the CDC has known since 1999 that vaccines cause autism, and they've covered it up for 26 years. How do we begin to have accountability? You want to call it something different? Truth commissions, criminal trials?
So
I would welcome
you're
that.
comparing the COVID-19 vaccine to the Holocaust.
Sir,
Well,
respectfully.
I
No, wait,
will
first-
ask that these posts be entered in the record if there's no objection.
Objection. Okay,
if-
let's, I want to move on.
So yeah, there's that. That was, according to YouTube, that was 13 days ago. And that's, I'm going to be real honest with you, that's really exciting to me to see a guy speaking that way. Now, they didn't create a weaponized virus. They created a story about a weaponized virus, and then they built hospital protocols that would be extremely useful in killing people by the bushel. People were executed via ventilator during this pandemic. And that's how it pretty much always works out. Now, let's jump to a guy that I regard as one of the only possibly decent people in the United States Senate. And yes, I'm also talking about a Senate that contains the super duper based and red pilled Rand Paul, whom I regard as a member of the deep state. But as far as I can tell, Ron Johnson's been a pretty good guy. So I'm going to read a statement from Ron Johnson. This is the opening statement of Ron Johnson. On the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, September 9th, 2025. As submitted to the record. I want to welcome everyone to today's hearing titled, How the Corruption of Science Has Impacted Public Perception and Policies Regarding Vaccines. I also want to thank the witnesses for their time, effort, and willingness to testify. The awareness that much of scientific research is unreliable is not new. In an article published in January 2009 titled Drug Companies and Doctors, A Story of Corruption, Dr. Marcia Angel stated, it is simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine. A May 2016 survey published in the journal Nature found that, quote, more than 70% of researchers have tried and failed to reproduce another scientist's experiments. And in May 2024, Wiley, a major academic publisher, closed 19 journals, primarily due to issues with fraudulent papers, largely attributed to paper mills producing fake or compromised studies. In the 2 years leading up to May 2024, Wiley had retracted more than 11,300 papers that were deemed compromised, often due to manipulated peer review processes or fabricated content. I have invited 2 witnesses who will discuss different examples of how research can be doctored or withheld in order to support a predetermined narrative and the powerful interests that benefit from that narrative. Attorney Aaron Siri will unveil a high-quality study completed in 2020 and suspiciously withheld by the authors that shows vaccinated children suffer 2.5 times the rate of chronic illness compared to unvaccinated children. PhD researcher Dr. Toby Rogers will discuss the history and obvious flaws in studies searching for the cause of autism. The minorities witness, Dr. Jake Scott, will make the case that the public should rely on research proving that vaccines are safe and effective. Concurrent with our first hearing, we released a report showing federal health agencies were aware that a safety signal did exist for myocarditis associated with the COVID mRNA injection and hid that fact from the public. Our second hearing allowed witnesses who have been impacted by vaccine injuries and fatal infectious diseases to tell their stories. The news media are all too willing to highlight a new outbreak of infectious disease, but is loath to broadcast what they generally describe as rare and mild vaccine injuries. As a result, the vaccine injured have been ignored and abandoned. In September 2024, I held a public roundtable discussion titled American Health and Nutrition, a Second Opinion, that highlighted America's alarming rate of chronic illness. Dr. Chris Palmer, a psychiatrist who studies the impact of nutrition on mental health, testified that when it comes to chronic illnesses, they do not want root causes discovered. By they, I assumed Dr. Palmer was referring to the powerful entities and individuals whose multi-billion-dollar businesses and organizational interests would be disrupted by the knowledge that the products they produce or promote cause harm. They certainly don't want the public to know the root cause if it's their product, and they are willing to go to great lengths by spending billions of dollars on advertising and lobbyists to keep the public from even asking the question, much less finding the answer. The purpose of these hearings is to force us to acknowledge reality. Exactly what all the realities and truths are, I cannot say. What I can say for sure is that we have been lied to repeatedly, and that in order to restore public faith in federal health agencies, integrity must return to science. We must also have open minds and be willing to face the truth. It has been interesting to see the media's reaction to our previous hearings. Except for a few highly biased attack pieces, the legacy media have largely ignored what I consider to be highly informative hearings. Perhaps they are taking advice from Senator Blumenthal, who, hours before our last hearing, Voices of the Vaccine Injured, held a press conference and was reported to have stated, "I hope nothing comes of this hearing. I hope people don't pay attention because it isn't deserving of credibility and attention." However, during the hearing, Senator Blumenthal stated, "I am heartbroken to hear these stories. It makes me want to do something." So, maybe hearing true and credible stories of vaccine injuries actually did deserve attention. I certainly believe today's testimony deserves attention, and I hope it will prompt us to do something to restore credibility and integrity to science and our federal health agencies. That's a good senator right there. Not that we have all that many of them, though I like to appreciate the ones we do have. I also like to appreciate our wonderful super chats. So hold for processing. I'm going to grab some of those real quick. Grammy 005 gifted 1 subscription. Thank you so much, Grammy. We also have B Rubble 20 gifted 5 subscriptions. Thank you so much for that. Rambo and Friends is the beneficiary of these. I'm just a substitute teacher up in here. We also have we have more of these. They're just going away. All right, good. These are subscriptions. Awesome. And all right, all done. Nice. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Everybody, do me a big favor. Hit the positive affirmation button wherever you might be. Thumbs up, if you please. Helps enormously when you do that. So thank you very much for that. And I'm going to continue in this presentation. We're going to talk about something else entirely. How inflation is related to Charlie Kirk's murder.
At the end, it's, where it says series response.
My name is Jake Scott, and I'm an infectious diseases physician at Stanford. I've spent my career treating patients and evaluating medical evidence with a focus on vaccine safety and efficacy. I have no financial conflicts of interest. My vaccine research is either self-funded or supported by Stanford University. Since April, I've co-led an international team building what we believe is the most comprehensive database of vaccine trials ever assembled. We set out to answer a fundamental question. What does the complete trial record actually show about vaccine testing? We've cataloged 1,088 randomized controlled trials from 1941 to 2025, involving over 10.5 million participants. Every entry is publicly verifiable through PubMed links. The entire database is openly accessible. Anyone with internet access can verify our findings. This is what transparency looks like. Our findings directly refute false claims about vaccine testing. We documented 661 trials using inert placebo controls with saline, sterile water, or other biologically inactive substances. Of these, 503 involved antigens that routine childhood vaccines are based on. Most importantly, we confirmed that all 16 antigens routinely recommended for children have been studied in placebo-controlled trials. Every single one. The claim that childhood vaccines haven't been tested against placebos is demonstrably false.
Do you now, just hearing it for the first time, do you think anything is strange about the way he said those things?
No, but I'm not familiar with this fight specifically, so I can't.
Okay.
I can't.
Okay, so first of all, when you see the response to this, you'll wonder if Jake Scott is a deranged human being, if he's just insane. Because he's coming so confidently and saying that we have all this data and he's publicly verifiable, and there's 661 studies that you would think that he was talking about the childhood schedule that are placebo controlled, but notice he didn't say that they were vaccines that are on the childhood schedule that were tested against these placebos. He said antigens that are commonly used in vaccines that are on the childhood schedule were tested against placebo. Okay?
I see. So
that's what he said. That's what he said. Now watch. Now when you see this, you wonder, like, what the hell is wrong? Is this guy, like, is he a zombie? Is he retarded? Because when you listen to the response, you'll think this guy must be retarded. But no, this is the power of inflation, because this guy works for Stanford University. How much inflation dollars has he received indirectly from Stanford that's funded by the federal government and all the other billionaire donors that it has, that are also probably inflation receptacles that all go to him in some drip, IV drip that he receives that he doesn't even realize. But his career is at stake because of the people that he has to answer to. So just watch this. This is Aaron Siri's response, and it's unbelievable.
Talk about the 661 studies that Dr. Scott is talking about in terms of these inert placebo controls. And just describe that in detail. I think it's interesting.
Sure. Actually, I think Dr. Scott has done a great service in terms of pointing out the lack of clinical trials supporting the safety of the routine injected childhood vaccines. You see, he's saying there are 661 inert controlled trials to support the safety of the routine injected childhood vaccines. But when you actually drill down into those 661 trials, let me give you the breakdown of them, okay? 567 of these trials were not a routine injected vaccine for a disease on the CDC childhood schedule. They were for HIV vaccines or other vaccines. So totally irrelevant to the safety of routine injected childhood vaccines. The remaining 94 studies, 70 of them did not involve healthy children. For example, trials of HIV positive adults. Again, completely irrelevant to the safety of childhood vaccines. Of the remaining 24, 21 did not involve a U.S. licensed vaccine or was a vaccine or it was not a vaccine used as a control to license a currently used U.S. licensed vaccine. For example, a Chinese flu shot, stuff like that. That leaves us with 3 studies, 3, that were claimed to have a inert control that were relied upon to license a routine injected childhood vaccine out of this entire list of 661. And these actually help really highlight the problem we have in terms of assessing safety with regards to the licensure of childhood vaccines. I want good clinical trial data. I need it for my practice. Okay, let me walk through those 3. One was a trial for the chickenpox vaccine, the varicella vaccine. Now that trial had, it was only a few hundred people, so it was underpowered anyway. But Dr. Scott says it's got an inert control, but actually it was an injection of neomycin, an antibiotic. That's not inert.
No.
And neomycin used topically can cause issues, let alone injected. The second one was Gardasil 4 trial, which had thousands and thousands of girls and women in the control group. Almost all of them got an aluminum adjuvant injection. And then there were a few hundred, only a few hundred, that were labeled as a inert control, but they weren't. They got everything that's in the vial except for the antigens and the alum, which included L-histidine, sorbate 80, sodium borate, yeast protein, not inert. And then the third one was a Gardasil 9 trial, which finally, by the way, did have a saline injection, just a few hundred. There were thousands and thousands of girls, women in that trial. They all got an injection of aluminum adjuvant, which I don't even know if it's ethical to inject somebody with something that's neuro and cytotoxic. But leaving that aside, the few hundred that got the placebo, but they only got it if they first got 3 doses of Gardasil 4. So again, not an actual inert control group. The result is there's 0 trials, 0, which were relied upon in this list of 61 to license a routine injected vaccine on the CDC schedule that included a placebo.
Like this is all bull.
Yes, indeed. It is all bullshit. I want anybody in this audience to take a look at the 1949 John Franklin Enders paper on measles. Or it might be 54. I don't remember the year. It's 49 or 54. And see if you can track any actual use of the scientific method. It's always propaganda. Medical science is a complete freaking joke. Hit the thumbs up button on this video if you can. Now I'm going to go to actual test. I'm going to go to a statement from that same guy you just saw, Aaron Siri, who is a lawyer. And he wrote this statement on September 5th, 2025. Check it out. It's from the law firm Siri and Glimstad. It is to the United States Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs, Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, Chairman Ron Johnson. Dear Chairman Johnson, thank you for the invitation to testify before the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations on September 9th, 2025 in the above referenced hearing. This written statement is provided for circulation to the subcommittee members and staff in advance of that hearing. I'm the managing partner of Siri and Glimstad LLP, which has over 100 professionals. Beyond our extensive consumer and privacy class action practice, our firm has a large practice focused on vaccine-related work, including hundreds of lawsuits related to vaccine injury exemptions, policy, and transparency, including frequent and voluminous suits against health agencies. As far as I'm aware, we have the largest vaccine practice in the country that does not represent pharmaceutical companies. In those lawsuits, we cannot appeal to credentials, but rather must prove claims regarding these products with government sources and data. This statement provides additional support concerning the corruption of vaccine-related science beyond my previous submission of May 19th, 2025, prior submission, which is incorporated herein by reference in its entirety. 1. Pre-licensure clinical trials. None of the clinical trials relied upon to license routine childhood vaccines on the CDC's childhood schedule confirmed those products were safe prior to licensure due to design limitations and other issues. Please refer to sections 1 and 2 of my prior submission for support for this fact. 2. Post-licensure safety. As detailed in section 3 of my prior submission, the safety of vaccines is also not properly studied after licensure. As detailed therein, autism, the issue claimed to have been most thoroughly studied, has not been studied with regard to infant vaccines. The IOM has made plain that, like autism, most of the commonly reported injuries have not been properly studied. HHS's so-called comprehensive review also confirms vaccine safety has not been properly studied. Even the injuries pharma companies have a basis to conclude are caused by their vaccines have barely been studied. The CDC's supposed vaccine safety systems do little more than raise serious concerns about vaccine safety, and the few studies that have looked at health outcomes between children exposed to vaccines and those not exposed have found the vaccinated had far higher rates of various chronic health conditions. The common thread through all of these public health failings is the a priori belief that vaccines are safe. This belief corrupts the science around vaccines, which either results in the failure to study properly the vaccines, or before or after licensure, or when a study is conducted, the publishing spurious results that serve only to confirm the policy message that vaccines are safe. While my prior submission provides proof to support the foregoing, the below provides one final example reflecting this reality. It is a robust study that was conducted at a major institution in the United States that compared the health outcomes between vaccinated, those who received one or more vaccines, and unvaccinated, those who received no vaccines, children, and was not published for one reason. Its results showed that the vaccinated children in the study suffered from numerous chronic health issues that did not plague the unvaccinated children in the study. 3. Henry Ford's study. Note that the following has been adapted from my book, Vaccines, Amen, The Religion of Vaccines, and reproduced with permission of the copyright holder. In early 2017, the Informed Consent Action Network, ICANN, a nonprofit that my firm regularly represents, was searching for a scientist who could conduct a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. ICANN's CEO had previously met Dr. Marcus Zervos, who is the head of infectious disease at one of the country's premier medical institutions, and thought he would be open to conducting such a study. Dr. Zervos is the division head of infectious disease at Henry Ford Health, which has 33,000 team members and over 250 locations. He is also the co-director of the Center for Emerging and Infectious Diseases at Wayne State University. and a principal investigator for pharmaceutical companies in vaccine trials. We met with Dr. Zervos in his office in early 2017 to urge him to conduct a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study so that he could, from his perspective, prove wrong those claiming vaccines cause harm. He was receptive to the idea. Dr. Zervos involved his colleagues in conducting this study using the health data already in the possession of Henry Ford Health, which interacts with millions of patients annually. This included Lois Lamerato, PhD, and Xiaoqin Amy Tang, PhD. Dr. Lamerato is an epidemiologist with over 250 published works and a prominent figure at Henry Ford Health, where she was the Study Management Division head in the Department of Public Health Services and the principal investigator for several significant studies, including annual CDC-funded influenza surveillance and vaccine effectiveness studies. Dr. Tang was a biostatistician at Henry Ford Health with a focus on biostatistics, comparative effectiveness, and healthcare research, and a professor and graduate program director of biological sciences with over 100 published studies and over 12 years of experience in clinical trials and real-world evidence research. These were, as far as I was aware, mainstream, traditional, accomplished scientists who held orthodox views regarding vaccines. From what I know, they set off and conducted this study when time permitted, without any specific funding for this project, instead using resources already available to them as part of Henry Ford Health, including its existing health data, despite its basic design. Given that this was a side project apparently conducted during spare time, it was not completed until more than 2 years after our initial meeting with Dr. Zervos. The study is completed. In early 2020, I received a copy of the study. It showed the results of the analysis comparing children within Henry Ford Health from birth onward who had no exposure, no vaccines, with those who were exposed, one or more vaccines. The results were similar to the findings in the handful of other vaccinated versus unvaccinated studies discussed in my prior submission. The Henry Ford study found that vaccinated children had a statistically significant increased rate of various serious chronic diseases. For example, vaccinated children had 3.03 times the rate of atopic disease, a group of allergic conditions, 4.29 times the rate of asthma, 5.53 times the rate of neurodevelopmental disorder, which included 3.28 times the rate of developmental delay and 4.47 times the rate of speech disorder and 5.96 times the rate of autoimmune disease. All of these findings were statistically significant. There were other conditions for which a rate could not be calculated because while many cases existed among the vaccinated children, there were no cases among the unvaccinated children. For example, while there were many cases of ADHD, learning disability, and tics in the vaccinated group, there were none in the unvaccinated group. I guess you can't divide by zero. The foregoing is obviously extremely troubling, especially because almost all these chronic diseases that showed an increased risk result from some form of immune system dysregulation. Many of them who already have some basis in the existing scientific literature linking them to vaccination, but the studies necessary to ascertain the rate and frequency of these harms had not been conducted. This study at Henry Ford finally provided hard figures on the rates at which childhood vaccines may be causing these harms. Unfortunately, while Dr. Zervos and Dr. Lamerato affirmed the study was well designed, well executed, and worthy of publication, they would not submit it for publication. because, among other reasons, Dr. Lamorato said she did not want to make doctors uncomfortable. And Dr. Zervo said he did not want to lose his job at Henry Ford. I said this in 2021. I killed all those kids because I needed the money is not the ironclad defense you think it is. Had this study showed that vaccinated children were healthier, I have no doubt it would have quickly and easily been published. It was not submitted for publication precisely because it found the opposite result. The study. Here's the relevant portion of the cover page of the unpublished Henry Ford study. Impact of childhood vaccination on short and long-term chronic health outcomes in children. A birth cohort study. Lois Lamorato, PhD. Abigail Chatfield, MS. Amy Tang, PhD. Marcus Zervos, MD. Henry Ford Health System, Detroit, Michigan. Department of Public Health Sciences, Division of Infectious Diseases, Wayne State University School of Medicine, Detroit, Michigan. Running head. Association of Childhood Vaccination on Chronic Health in Children. Word count, 292 in the abstract, 4,143 in the body. Authors, Lois Lamorato, PhD, Senior Scientist, Public Health Sciences, Henry Ford Health System. Financial disclosure, this study had no external funding. And here is a copy of its abstract. Abstract. Objective. To compare the short and long-term health outcomes within a captured payer environment of children exposed to one or more vaccines to those unexposed. Design. Birth cohort study. Setting. Integrated healthcare system in Michigan. Participants 18,468 children born between 2000 and 2016 enrolled in the health system insurance plan. Main outcome measures. Development of a chronic health condition over time. Results. A total of 18,468 consecutive subjects met eligibility criteria for the study, of which 1,957 had no exposure to vaccination and 16,511 had received at least one vaccine, and exposure to vaccination was independently associated with an increased risk of developing a chronic health condition: asthma, autoimmune disease, atopic disease, neurodevelopmental disorder. There were no chronic health conditions associated with an increased risk in the unexposed group. The overall probability of being free of a chronic health condition at 10 years of follow-up was 43% in the group exposed to vaccination and 83% in the unexposed group. Conclusion. This study found that exposure to vaccination was independently associated with an overall 2.5-fold increase in the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition when compared to children unexposed to vaccination. This association was primarily driven by asthma, atopic disease, eczema, autoimmune disease, and neurodevelopmental disorders. This suggests that in certain children, exposure to vaccination may increase the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition, particularly for one of these conditions. As seen from the abstract, the study isolated 18,468 children in the Henry Ford medical system who were enrolled in that system from birth. This meant that the data captured all medical encounters from birth until disenrollment, including any vaccines each child received and the medical conditions they were coded for. Among these 18,468 children, 1,957 had no exposure to vaccination, meaning 0 vaccines, and 16,511 had received at least one vaccine during their enrollment with various levels of exposure, meaning various vaccines. The study began with explaining it was conducted to provide results intended to reassure parents of the overall safety of vaccination. Quote, vaccination has reduced the incidence of certain targeted childhood infections and their associated morbidity and mortality. Nonetheless, vaccine hesitancy remains a significant barrier to maintaining and increasing vaccine uptake, and the number of parents foregoing all vaccinations has been increasing. Common parental concerns relate to the growth of the vaccine schedule, administering multiple vaccines contemporaneously, and the potential for long-term adverse health outcomes from vaccination. Research addressing these vaccine safety concerns can assist clinicians in discussions with their patients and serve to reassure parents of the overall safety of vaccination. End quote. Hence, the stated goal of the study was to rule out vaccines as the cause of long-term adverse health outcomes in order to reassure parents of the overall safety of vaccination, meaning the intent of the study was to decrease vaccine hesitancy and thus increase vaccine uptake. To achieve this goal, the study explained that it compared the short and long-term health outcomes within a captured payer environment of children unexposed to vaccines with those exposed to one or more vaccines, which could allay parental concerns and bolster vaccine confidence. The study also pointed out that it could not look to the existing pre- and post-licensure safety data to rule out vaccines as the cause because, quote, there is a paucity, scarcity of data evaluating the impact of vaccination on long-term health outcomes. The safety review period in pre-licensure clinical trials is typically of insufficient duration, less than or equal to 30 days, to assess a vaccine's impact on long-term health outcomes, and post-licensure observational studies have had mixed results with regard to whether vaccines are associated with developing certain health conditions. End quote. Explaining the reliability of the data used for the study, it points out that, quote, Henry Ford Health System, HFSHS, is a large vertically integrated healthcare system with 4.2 million ambulatory care visits annually, and its Health Alliance Plan, a nonprofit health maintenance organization and subsidiary of HFHS, has approximately 570,000 enrolled members. It then explains that using the vast database of health records in this medical system, the study, quote, evaluated health outcomes of a consecutive cohort of children born between 2000 and 2016 and enrolled in HAP. Subjects were observed from birth until the earlier of disenrollment in the plan or December 31st, 2017. And data used for the study came from their medical, clinical, and payer records from HFHS and HAP, and was supplemented with data from the State of Michigan Immunization Registry. To be included in the study, a participant had to be born and enrolled in HAP for greater than or equal to 60 days between January 1st, 2000 and December 31st, 2016, with HFHS designated as their primary care system. The study excluded children born with congenital conditions present or discovered after birth because these exclusions correspond with the objective of evaluating long-term health outcomes in a generally healthy birth cohort. The study explained that, quote, a total of 18,468 consecutive subjects met eligibility criteria, of which 1,957 were unexposed, unvaccinated, and 16,511 were exposed to at least one vaccine. Among the exposed, those who had received one or more vaccines, the median number of vaccinations was 18. Having segregated the total 18,468 children into two groups, exposed and unexposed, the study then calculated the incidence rates and incidence rate ratios, incidence rates and incidence rate ratios, IRR, based on exposure status prior to developing the condition. How many vaccines did you take? While they expected to find that the vaccinated children were healthier than, or at least as healthy as, the unvaccinated children, they instead found the following, quote, overall, the development of a chronic health condition occurred more often in the group exposed versus unexposed to vaccination and was more common in those exposed to vaccination. Detailing specific medical conditions, they explained that a, quote, statistically significant association was found between vaccination and the incidence of asthma, atopic and autoimmune disease, and mental health and neurodevelopmental disorders, including developmental delay and speech disorder, end quote. The increased risks they found were not small. It wasn't an IRR of 1.02, which would mean a 2% increased risk, or an IRR of 1.11, which would mean an 11% increased risk. Instead, as the study explained, quote, conditions occurring more frequently in exposed subjects included ear infection, chronic ear infection, anaphylaxis, and asthma attack or bronchospasm. It went on to explain that even after accounting for differences between the vaccinated and unvaccinated groups, i.e. multivariate adjustment, it remained true that, quote, vaccination was independently associated with an increased risk of developing a chronic health condition. To further validate these findings, because, quote, enrollment time was shorter in the unexposed group, meaning the unvaccinated children were, on average, enrolled for less time in the Henry Ford system as compared to the vaccinated children, the study conducted, quote, a sensitivity analysis for developing a chronic health condition for subjects enrolled in the health plan for at least 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years, which demonstrated consistent results. The result of this sensitivity analysis was, quote, vaccine exposure was associated with higher incidence of a chronic health condition for subjects enrolled at least 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years, as well as a higher risk for developing a chronic health condition for subjects enrolled at least 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years. Meaning, when excluding from the study children who were not enrolled for certain minimum intervals in the Henry Ford health system, it revealed even greater harm, not less. For example, when they excluded children who were not enrolled for at least 5 years after birth, it showed vaccinated children had 4.05 times the rate of chronic disease, meaning a 305% increased risk compared to 2.75 times the rate of chronic disease, meaning a 175% increased risk when looking at children with all enrollment periods. This is because by only including children enrolled for at least 5 years, it excluded the vaccinated children who had not yet had a chance to develop a chronic disease. This type of sensitivity analysis again confirmed the strong validity of the study's results. The study also wanted to make sure that the conclusions were not due to the possibility that the unvaccinated children went to the doctor less frequently. To address this possibility, the study, quote, conducted a sensitivity analysis by repeating the above analyses using only subjects with at least one healthcare encounter during enrollment. After doing so, the study found that, quote, vaccine exposure was associated with higher incidence of a chronic health condition for subjects with at least one healthcare encounter, as well as a higher risk for developing a chronic health condition, meaning even excluding the healthiest unvaccinated children who didn't ever need medical attention at Henry Ford, the study still found the vaccinated children had a higher rate of chronic health conditions. The study also explained that, quote, many conditions evaluated in this study are serious and cannot be self-treated, such as asthma, diabetes, anaphylaxis, or asthma attack, warranting urgent medical attention. And these analyses reflect that its findings do not appear to be due to differential use of health resources. The study describes its strengths as follows. Major strengths of this study are that it evaluated a captured population, enrolled a consecutive birth cohort, evaluated subjects only while enrolled, only relied upon medical records to determine diagnoses, encounters and vaccines administered, unlike prior works, which often relied upon parental recall and survey data, had a completely unexposed cohort and used groupings of health conditions which can reveal relationships that are not apparent when evaluating specific disorders individually, particularly if they are rare. Though some results were unexpected, others are consistent with conclusions from prior systematic reviews, including by the IOM, such as the accepted causal relationship between vaccination and anaphylaxis, which we observed, or the rejection of a causal relationship between vaccination and cancer, or MMR vaccine and autism. This contributes to the internal validity of this study's findings. The study described its limitations as follows. This study has limitations. As it is retrospective, we cannot exclude the possibility of unidentified confounders. However, this concern is tempered by the finding of significant associations between vaccination and particular outcomes, with some hazard ratios in the 2.5 to 6 times risk. We lacked information on socioeconomic status or potentially relevant post-birth factors such as diet or lifestyle, but did adjust for several important baseline confounders such as gender, ethnicity, gestational age, and birth weight. To detect the potential for uncontrolled confounding, the literature suggests evaluating disorders with no expected causal association with vaccination, a controlled outcome such as injuries or cancer. Importantly, in this regard, we found no association between vaccine exposure and cancer. Additionally, we relied on diagnosis codes in administrative data, which is commonly used in epidemiologic research, but has some inherent limitations. Unvaccinated children have less healthcare use overall. Well visits coincide with the vaccination schedule and provide more opportunities for assessment and diagnosis in those receiving vaccines compared to unvaccinated children, which could introduce an ascertainment bias. In this study, exposed children had an average of 7 annual encounters. Irrespective of having a chronic health condition, unexposed children had an average of 2 annual encounters, but an average of almost 5 annual encounters if diagnosed with a chronic health condition. This likely demonstrates that when a child had a medical condition, parents sought health care. In fact, many conditions evaluated in this study are serious and cannot be self-treated, such as asthma, diabetes, anaphylaxis, or asthma attack warranting urgent medical attention. We nonetheless conducted several sensitivity analyses to explore the influence of healthcare use in order to improve the internal validity of this study and minimize potential ascertainment bias. To ensure the unexposed group's shorter follow-up duration did not influence the results, we repeated the Cox proportional hazards analysis for the chronic health composite outcome for those in the plan for 1, 3, and 5 years, and for those who had at least one healthcare encounter, which demonstrated results consistent with the overall findings. The association between vaccination and developing a chronic health condition was independent of these factors. Therefore, our findings do not appear to be due to differential use of health resources. Our study solely evaluated whether or not vaccination was associated with clinically relevant outcomes, conditions that currently contribute to the rising chronic health disease burden in children. We did not evaluate the influence of temporal relationships, individual vaccines, or the number of vaccines, which limits this investigation, but also minimizes the potential for reverse causality. The study then provides a conclusion, followed by tables, outlining the precise findings for each condition. Here is the study's conclusion. In this study, we found vaccine exposure in children was associated with an increased risk of developing a chronic health disorder. This association was primarily driven by an increased risk for asthma, atopy, which means allergies, eczema, autoimmune disease, and neurodevelopmental disorders. This suggests that in certain susceptible children, exposure to vaccination may increase the likelihood of developing a chronic health condition, particularly for one of these conditions. Our preliminary findings cannot prove causality and warrant further investigation. The study then detailed the specific findings for each chronic disease in 2 tables. The following is from a table in the study titled Incidence of Chronic Health Conditions Stratified by Vaccine Exposure Status, and reflects the number of instances denoted as N, capital N, and the rate denoted as incidence per 1 million patient years of a given medical condition for each group. The rate is critical because there were more children in the exposed 16,511 than the unexposed 1,957 children. Also, note that some of the unvaccinated children have some of the listed chronic health conditions, and hence other environmental insults aside from vaccines can certainly cause these conditions. Finally, please note that for many of the conditions, there were many cases in the vaccinated group, but none in the unvaccinated group. When that happened, an incident rate ratio could not be calculated, since all cases occurred in the group exposed to vaccination and no cases occurred in the unexposed group. The reason it cannot be calculated is because division breaks down when one value is 0. For example, there were 262 cases of ADHD in the vaccinated group. There were 0 in the unvaccinated group. Hence, a ratio could not be calculated for this condition. Or you could just say it's infinity. Any vaccine exposure, no vaccine exposure. That's the only 2 categories you have. We've summarized the incidence rates difference. Oh, look, they're putting lazy 8. So yeah, they're using infinity. It's infinity % more likely. As you can see from this table, many conditions, the incidence and rate among the vaccinated is far greater than among the unvaccinated. For many others, no rate could be calculated for the reasons that we just described. So let's look at this. Any vaccine exposure, the IRR, they're just dividing. So all it is just take this one, divide it by this one, right? Okay. So 277 divided by 111, bam, 2.48, 4.09 for asthma, 6.16 for autoimmune, 6.15 for neurodevelopmental disorder. And those neurodevelopmental disorders break down as ADHD, autism, behavioral disability, developmental delay, learning disability, intellectual disability, speech disorder, motor disability, tics, other psychological disability. The study then provides a table that adjusts for gender, race, birth weight, respiratory distress at birth, birth trauma, and prematurity. These adjustments are intended to account for potential imbalances between the vaccinated and unvaccinated group for these factors, as you will see in the following table, which the study titled Cox Proportional Hazards Regression Analysis for Vaccine Exposure and Development of a Chronic Health Condition. The adjusted hazard ratios are just as concerning. The hazard ratio, or HR, is similar to the IRR, as it reflects the increased risk if above 1 or decreased risk if below 1 of having a given condition among the vaccinated as compared to the unvaccinated. The confidence interval, or CI, next to each HR we have already discussed, and the p-value is another way of reflecting whether the finding is statistically significant. A p-value at or below 0.05 means the HR finding is statistically significant. Okay, so the ones that are statistically significant, chronic health conditions, it has a p-value less than 0.0001. Asthma, less than 0.0. Just take it this way. The p-value means the probability of this happening randomly. Here is one last chart from the study that shows the percentage of the vaccinated children who developed at least one chronic health issue over time versus the percentage of unvaccinated children who developed at least one chronic health issue over time. This chart reflects that after 10 years, 43% of the vaccinated children had no diagnosed condition, whereas 83% of the unvaccinated children had no diagnosed condition. Stated inversely, After 10 years, 57% of the vaccinated children had been diagnosed with one or more chronic health conditions, whereas only 17% of the unvaccinated children were diagnosed with one or more chronic health conditions. Here is a recreated chart titled Kaplan-Meier curve, 10-year chronic disease-free survival by vaccine exposure from the study. Reviewing these tables and this chart should make it clear why the study's authors and Henry Ford Health did not want this study published. For the authors, publishing this study would have turned virtually every person and institution in their world against them. Publishing the study would have been the right thing to do, the brave thing to do. But it would have ignited the wrath of nearly everyone and every institution that they know, rely upon, and hold dear. Of course, if doing the right thing, the moral thing, the ethical thing regarding vaccines did not involve social and career suicide, we would not be in the predicament we find ourselves in. If this study and others like it were conducted and were published in medical journals, the first scientific step needed to protect children from vaccine injury would have been taken. We can do far better than a society in which more than half of our children suffer from a chronic health condition. We can save children from both harm from infectious diseases and harm from these products. Aaron Seary, Esquire, Seary and Glimstad, LLP. Oh, you see, guys, I thought this wasn't published and that we couldn't get our hands on the method. That study is now effectively published. Everything in that thing explains what they did. All they did was just take a giant spreadsheet and analyze it. That's freaking crazy, man. I didn't know that that was just so meticulously done. Now, I also want to be very clear that it can't prove causation, partially because of the freaking problem of induction. David Hume first started talking about that a long time ago. But also, you can't prove causation with an observational study. You have to, the closest thing we have to proof of causation is the scientific method. We have an observed phenomenon. Kid presents with autism, and then you define it well, and then you attempt to induce autism. Of course, that's pretty unethical, but that would be the actual scientific method. So just pointing that out real quick. All right, let us continue. And do me a favor, hit the thumbs up on this video, guys. Definitely hit the thumbs up. And I've got 10 thumbs downs. So thanks for that. It's mean. You might hurt my feelings. So just be aware that you really need to do me a favor and make up for all those thumbs downs, the 10 thumbs downs we just got. Also, I want to tell everybody, because I'm not done yet, but I want to tell everybody about one of the amazing sponsors, a little thing called the Feel Good Protocol, the Feel Great Protocol. Check this out.
They don't want you to know about this simple daily protocol that's helping people ditch their meds and reclaim their health and live again. Here's how. If you're constantly battling low energy, cravings, stubborn weight, just feeling off, listen up. Up to 88% of American adults suffer from some degree of insulin resistance. The Feel Great Protocol is a simple daily 2-step system designed to help your body work with you, not against you. That's it. No crazy diets, no meds, just science-backed support your body understands. Feel Great is perfect for you if you have low energy, weight control, high blood pressure or cholesterol, poor sleep, diabetes, snacking, overeating, cravings, gut health, PCOS, and more. This isn't a trend, it's a transformation. Support Rambo and lock in $70 off only at rambospecial.com. If you're ready to reclaim your health and feel great again, go to rambospecial.com.
I've been a type 2 diabetic for 15 years. I was overweight for 25 years. I was an eating machine. I would hit the refrigerator, eat something. An hour later, eat something. My doctor wanted to put me on another med. He wanted to put me on a statin. And that was the line in the sand for me. I was like, no, I'm already on enough meds because of the metformin I was on. Not to mention 10 milligrams of lisinopril for high blood pressure. I'd already been to every vitamin store in the world looking for supplements. And that's when I said, I'm going to look for something. And I saw this protocol on TikTok. And here I am, 120 pounds lighter. I went from an A1C of 9.2 to 6.2 in 3 months. Now I'm at a 5.4. Cholesterol is down. And the 159 a month, I save $300 a month in just grocery bill. I am cash positive every month. It's crazy. It has changed my life. The energy that I have is incredible. I feel better than when I was 40. This is not something that you keep for yourself. This is something you share with your family. You share with your friends because you cannot understand the quality of life you'll gain by returning yourself back to good metabolic health. Give yourself the 90 days.
If you're ready to reclaim your health and feel great again, go to rambospecial.com.
I'll tell you something else, guys. We are just seeing amazing results from this. And I know that I have powerful issues when it comes to resisting the urge to snack. And I know that this is one of the best ways to go about it. So go to rambospecial.com, sign up, because not only can you improve your health, you can improve your pocketbook at the same time. They have an amazing system. Take advantage of it today. That's rambospecial.com. And now I also want to talk to you about, the castor blend, because people are buying it like absolute gangbusters. And I'm very gratified to hear that, because castor oil is one of the great suppressed remedies in all of human history. And the suppression is fairly recent. You know, you got instances of Cleopatra using it to improve her eyesight. Generally speaking, it's just a detoxifying carrier. And when I started putting the castor blend on my forehead, and I just started doing it compulsively, we didn't even call it the castor blend then. I want to credit Tracy Garcia with giving me the idea for producing a castor oil product in the first place. And my wife developed it, and it's just a 40% castor oil, and then you add argan oil, amaranth oil, jojoba oil, apricot kernel oil, sea buckthorn fruit oil, natural vitamin E oil, and then an essential oil blend that includes tea tree, rose geranium, lavender, patchouli, and rosemary. You put that all together, you get something that, guess what? It caused her to start accusing me of getting Botox in my forehead. Go to tulipblooms.shop, because right now, and only right now, you go there and you get yourself a buy one, get one half off on the castor blend, our best-selling product, our flagship product, our OG product. And if you use promo code Rambo, you get an extra 10% off. And then 25% of that order goes straight to pay for the bills right here at Rambo and Friends. Don't wait. Do it now. Do it at tulipblooms.shop. That's tulipblooms.shop. Tulipblooms.shop. Promo code Rambo. All right, now I got more stuff for you.
Let's pull it back.
To continue on our theme.
Little bit. I heard for the first time during the RFK Jr. hearing that there's been a study that vaccines have saved 154 million lives. You have a somewhat interesting take on that. Do you want to talk a bit about that scientific gem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the claim about 154 million lives saved is it actually is the epitome of the corruption of science. It reflects the corruption of science in action. While this Henry Ford study, for example, is based on actual data, medical records, the immunization registry, and look carefully at it, this study is just based on guesswork and assumptions. It is a study published by the WHO. It is essentially an advertising piece by them for how effective their immunization program has been over the last 50 years. And they claim there's 154 million lives saved. But when you look at this study, unlike the Henry Ford study, it has no confidence intervals. So what is the confidence interval of that 154 million claim? What is the reliability range of it? It doesn't have one. You know why it doesn't have one? Because it's totally unreliable. As buried in page 42 of the supplement to that quote unquote advertising piece by the WHO, it's in a section entitled Uncertainty of Estimates, it says that, quote, it cannot put, quote, bounds around the veracity of the estimates. It can't put bounds around the veracity of the estimates. And that, quote, any bounds are arbitrary, end quote, and that, quote, it should not be interpreted as a claim to where the edges of valid estimates possibly lie, end quote. What that means is it could be equally true that 200 million lives were lost because of the vaccine program. It's an unbounded estimate. That is the corruption of science, to rely on that. And it gets worse from there because, and when you actually look at the hard data, the number makes no sense. Almost the entirety of that 154 million lives saved comes down to two vaccines, DTP and measles vaccine. Well, as laid out thoroughly in my submission, the studies that look at DTP vaccine show that it causes more mortality, far more mortality than lives saved. While it may reduce deaths from diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, the studies show numerous rate the kids. The seminal study showed that the kids who got DTP died at 10 times the rate than kids who did not get that vaccine. And that is, I'll give the PubMed number, it's 5360569. And that study is not just one study sitting on its own. It comes after a long series of studies. It's published in 2017, and then another one in 2018. And DTP is the most commonly used vaccine in the world. That's what the science, based on hard data, that has confidence intervals, shows. Not this WHO advertising report with no confidence intervals. The other vaccine that accounts for almost the entirety of the 154 million lives saved is the measles vaccine. The study assumes, I guess to its credit, that 60% of that decline was from other factors and 40% of the decline in measles mortality was from the vaccine. Here's the thing. When you look at the decline in measles mortality in other countries when there were no vaccines, like the US, between 1900 and the first vaccine in 1963, measles mortality declined by 99%. That's CDC data, not assumption. When you look at the UK data, between 1900 and 1968, when they first started the first measles vaccine there, measles mortality there declined by 99%. So when you overlay that number, not use a 40% decline, but 99%, and then you add in the increased deaths from DTP, you're upside down already. That's why they can't put a bound on their 54 million lives claim. Those vaccines cost a lot more than
Let me give Senator Marino a chance. Okay.
May I ask one last point on this, and I will stop. I'm sorry. And it's this: as I've laid out in my submission, study after study after study shows that people who get measles vaccine die at far less lower rates from heart disease and from various cancers. It's not me saying that. I'm just a lawyer, as Senator Blumenthal pointed out. Okay, but that's what the studies show, and they're consistent. They're an inconvenient truth when it comes to the medical establishment. When you add in that data as well, it's really upside down. I lay that out, including a 100,000 person, 20-year prospective study in Japan that found that those who got measles and mumps, about 7% were dead from heart disease after about 20 years, whereas those who didn't get measles and mumps, around 14% of them were dead after 20 years. Heart disease is the #1 killer of folks in the United States. I'll stop there.
Boy, that went by too fast. I wanted to see him go after I really want to see him go after Ron Johnson, go after that Scott, whatever his name was, the guy who claimed all the efficacy studies were done, all of the double-blind trials were done for the vaccines, but we didn't get to that. All right. And now, briannaladapo.substack.com. In my vaccine presentation produced by Root Bitch. This is briannaladapo.substack.com. So check it out and let us begin. Freedom, Our Forgotten Birthright by Brianna Ladapo, September 5th, 2025. Wednesday marked a momentous event that will undoubtedly change the course of history when Dr. Joseph Ladapo, Florida's courageous and brilliant Surgeon General, yes, my wonderful husband, announced Florida's intention to end all vaccine mandates. It was a pivotal and long-awaited victory for health freedom. At the moment of announcement, the crowd erupted with a liberated jubilance that only manifests when souls have finally broken free of their bondage after years of desperation, determination, and defiance. The wild cheering and applause were deafening, matched only by the sobs of relief and gratitude. It was a truly beautiful moment of divinity and a welcome harbinger of things to come. However, not everyone is happy about this development. There are an astonishing number of people whose minds are so enslaved that in their frustration, disbelief, and confusion, they can only echo the Machiavellian messaging of their captors. For those who are angry, afraid, and lashing out now, I'm not going to debate the wisdom, morality, or science of this decision with you. That time has passed. Millions of courageous parents, healthcare providers, and scientists have spent decades researching and revealing the dubious origins, non-existent safety profiles, and dirty money trails surrounding vaccines and the greed-driven industry that spawned them. Countless brilliant minds have already done the heavy lifting for you by plainly laying out vaccine efficacy and safety data, which was deliberately hidden from the public in books, articles, courses, and films. This information is all readily available for you to discover. But it is your own responsibility to reject intellectual laziness and educate yourselves. You can choose to remain uninformed and continue baselessly ranting and blaming others. But if you want to know the truth, simply stop allowing yourself to be spoon-fed by those who have a financial interest in your ignorance, and do a little research. Many of you love to regurgitate mainstream media messaging about the safety, necessity, and efficacy of vaccines, but have little understanding of or real-world experience with their very real, devastating, and, though the pharmaceutical industry would have you believe otherwise, prevalent side effects. If you have ever taken your perfectly healthy, bouncy, communicative, mischievous 2-year-old girl to get a vaccine and watched the light leave her eyes and her sparkle of awareness and engagement fade until she was merely a mute, vacant shell of the child she had always been, you'd feel differently. If you had ever watched your healthy, athletic spouse visit the doctor for a sprained ankle and acquiesce to the quick vaccine conveniently offered during the routine checkup, only to drop dead less than 24 hours later from unknown causes, you'd feel differently. If you had ever taken your elderly but healthy and active mother who had been in remission from cancer for 25 years to get vaccinated, only to somehow develop late-stage incurable cancer within 3 weeks, you'd feel differently. If you had ever watched your healthy, strong 17-year-old nephew, quarterback of his high school football team, collapse and die on the field a week after being vaccinated, you'd feel differently if you had the courage to examine critically the origins of medical education in the United States and follow the money back to the early 1900s when John D. Rockefeller used his immense wealth to force doctors to abandon integrative and naturopathic medical approaches and adopt pharmaceutical-based medicine, read the Flexner Report of 1910, in order to further line his pockets and secure power over the medical industry, you'd feel differently. In response to Wednesday's announcement, someone said to me that she is, quote, astounded at how little credit my husband, an actual physician, and I give clinical physicians. I found this an astonishing statement because if, in fact, you've noticed that millions of people, including many highly regarded physicians, not to mention nurses, parents, teachers, lawyers, scientists, professors, and so many more, have lost their faith in clinical physicians and the medical industry, which is true. The intelligent response to this observation, not outrage, it's curiosity. Logic clearly dictates that if people who have long trusted the establishment and accepted ways of doing things suddenly stop trusting and begin rejecting that establishment, these intelligent responses would be to ask why. Intelligent questions might include, why do they feel this way? What do they know that I don't? What experiences have they had to change so profoundly their opinion about this group or practice? What information am I unaware of that might help me understand this phenomenon? Far too often, the knee-jerk reaction of the uninformed is rage and indignant condemnation. But what they never seem to consider is that it's not a fluke, that millions of people worldwide, a number that notably is ever increasing, have chosen not to vaccinate their children. Rather, it is a deliberate, well-researched, and well-reasoned choice. And an intelligent mind would explore the reasons for this choice rather than blindly judge those who make it. A little intellectual curiosity would not only prevent an extraordinary amount of damage to relationships and families, but it might even save your life or the life of your child. Additionally, there are too many people who excuse their blind, near religious worship of vaccines by citing the omniscience of the physicians who prescribe them. Did you know that most doctors receive less than 3 hours of vaccine education in medical school? Those of us who have vaccine-injured children have spent hundreds, often thousands of hours on vaccine education. There is a reason public health agencies and pro-vaccine health officials seldom agree to open debate with those who are truly educated about the history, the science behind, and legitimate dangers of vaccination. From a moral, scientific, and health policy perspective, vaccine mandates are indefensible because vaccines are not nearly as safe as they would have you believe. But don't take my word for it. Please take personal responsibility for your education and do your own research. Factual information is readily available and waiting for you to discover it. You know what? Even if you finally, truly, thoroughly research every aspect of vaccines by reading everything there is to read, watching everything there is to watch, and witnessing the anguish of real people who are truly suffering as a result of these so-called immunizations, and you still somehow believe the narrative that vaccines were created and mandated for your benefit, that's okay too. You have the absolute right to think that. You have the right to put whatever you want into your own body. However, what you do not and will never have the right to do is to take that choice away from another sovereign being. You do not get to decide what anyone else puts into their body or their children's bodies. Freedom and choice are the birthright of human beings, and no one, no person, no organization, no government has the right to take that choice away. If you truly believe that vaccines will protect you, then you can go and get them. No one is stopping you. If you actually believe they work and will keep you safe, then you have nothing to fear from unvaccinated people, and you have no need to force vaccination on others. Nobody is trying to stop you from exercising your right to vaccinate, but millions of us have watched our loved ones suffer hideous injury and death at the hands of these vaccines, which is why we are unmoved by your fury and your self-righteousness. You believe in vaccines because you've been told to believe in them by a corrupt medical establishment that has a vested interest in keeping you subservient and stupid. At least have the courage to examine your choices and be honest about your reasons for making them. This is not the last you're going to hear about moving humanity back in the direction of freedom and choice, where it has always belonged. Your outrage isn't going to change our beliefs or what we know to be right for ourselves and our families. I suggest you examine your beliefs, where they come from, and why you are still clinging to them, because those beliefs will be challenged in the coming days. You have the absolute right to believe whatever you want, and so do I. It is the responsibility of each one of us to choose what we hold true, what is right and wrong for ourselves and our children, and what is worth fighting for, despite the Herculean efforts of those who have a vested interest in keeping the population weak, uninformed, and easily controlled. This issue is not going away. We will never, ever quiet down, back away, or hide from those who attempt to appropriate our God-given right to sovereignty over our own bodies. We will never suppress the truth to make you comfortable, because this issue and every other issue that concerns free will and the right to choose will determine the very future of humanity. This is about freedom versus enslavement, morality versus immorality, justice versus injustice, and light versus darkness. In some battles, there is no middle ground, which is why we will never compromise. There is only one sustainable path forward. Choose light, choose humanity, choose freedom. And that is briannaladapo.substack.com. I was not expecting that to be such a barn burner. Hot damn. Ooh, I want to thank Brian, who just wrote at the Tulip Blooms website about the Tulip Soothe Balm. This really helped with some inflammation I have in and around my elbows. Yes, guys, the Tulip Soothe Balm is great stuff. I'm out of Kunzia essential oil, so I can't make more yet, but you can back order it on our website if you still want to get it. I still haven't bumped the price up yet. I need to do that. Furthermore, go to epicminerals.net. That's epicminerals.net. Get your hands on the Zeolite Extra Spray. You can also get it at tulipblooms.shop. The reason I'm saying that right now is because if you have gotten a whole bunch of vaccines over the course of your life, one of the things that's stuck inside you right now is a whole bunch of heavy metals. Those are adjuvants that they put in these things designed to create the immune response that induces the so-called immunity, which is actually all just flim-flam. If you use a simple spray in your mouth, like that, at epicminerals.net, the Zeolite Extra Spray with humic and fulvic acids, it binds to heavy metals and you just pee them right out. I have not been sick other than, of course, election night. I worried myself sick for that one. Go to epicminerals.net and use promo code Rambo for 10% off, and bam, 25% of that order goes straight to pay the bills over at Rambo and Friends right here. All of you, please do me a favor and check out my YouTube channel, Patrick Gunnels, because I'm simulcasting to that, and we're going to see just how free speech goes on YouTube now, because I have said so much wrong think, so much stuff that has been bannable material on YouTube. This is simulcasting right there, right now. So we're going to see what happens. If those sons of bitches do this to me again and say, no, you have said misinformation, then it was all just bullcrap. But anyway, wow. What a wonderful audience. So also email me if you're interested in attending ThreadFest 3. I have the agreement in front of me with the Hilton in Southlake, Texas. The event will be a March 19th will be the VIP dinner. March 20th will be the first day of speakers and a dance party. We'll have a dance party on Friday night, and we're going to do ballroom dancing, like real dancing. And then on Saturday, we're going to have speakers again, and then we're going to have a one-act play starring me and a to-be-announced co-star. It is a duet. I have also created cameo appearances for Joe Rambo and Dave News Treason, and I'm very excited about this. It is going to be a 2025 adaptation of 1968's The Newsbenders, and I'm almost done with the script, just tweaking it here and there. And I'm looking for a co-host because there are two major roles in it. Everything else is just small. And so that'll be Saturday night. And then Sunday morning, we will wrap up. It's going to be amazing. I don't have the Ticket Spice link set up yet, but I've sold a few tickets anyway, just informally over email. And so I want to keep doing that for a little bit. Gypsy Reject, we will be doing this in live stream as well, but not 100% certain. I really want to make it so that the people who pay to be there are the ones who see it first. So that's important. In any event, just email me, please, at pgunnels@gmail.com. pgunnels@gmail.com. If you have attended an event with me before, I can informally arrange for you to purchase tickets early. And then after that, once my wife has my Ticket Spice link up and running and I sign the agreement with the Hilton, we can move forward. I don't know. We could do square dancing too, by the way, TBA 369. There's nothing wrong with square dancing, but it wasn't what I was thinking of. I was thinking about the cha-cha. I was thinking about the rumba. I was thinking maybe about swing dancing. I was thinking maybe we could figure out a way to incorporate a little waltz in there. That wouldn't be that bad, would it? Anyway, in any event, I'm very excited about this. It's ThreadFest 3. It's taking place in Dallas, Texas. Informally, I am now selling tickets, and I've already sold a few. So email me at pgunnels@gmail.com if that is an event that you would be interested in, and I will quote ticket prices to you. Meals, Friday, it's breakfast and lunch. Saturday, breakfast and lunch. Yeah, so it's 4 meals are included with that, and it's good food. So check it out by emailing me, or go to tulipblooms.shop to purchase all those wonderful products. And of course, go to epicminerals.net to get yourself clear of heavy metals. I want to remind everybody here to go to rambospecial.com. rambospecial.com. It is an amazing thing. I'm not even exaggerating, guys. The snacking, the overeating, the cravings, fatty liver, insulin resistance, gut health problems, fatigue, depression. The Feel Great protocol is just something that will really, really change things for you. So go to rambospecial.com. Just get the blueprint. Get the Feel Great protocol blueprint. Put your name, your email address, and your phone number in there. You can change your life with this, guys. Go to rambospecial.com. I want to thank everybody for putting up with me as your substitute teacher today. I have had an absolutely magnificent time, and I really hope that you'll let me do it again. And in the meantime, I'm going to see if I can track. I have a way that I end my shows, and that is that I do a prayer. So before I start with that, help me out. Hit the thumbs up on this video. When you hit the thumbs up on this video, not only does it have a chance of putting it on the leaderboard, this is the other part. It tells Joe, hey, having Patrick substitute teach every once in a while is not such a bad thing. So hit the thumbs up. Really appreciate that. And now I'm going to say a prayer. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. I love you all. Thank you so much for being here. See you next time.